In this video, I want to go over basic functions and the way formulas work in Excel. So I have this little spreadsheet that I put together that's going to kind of be our guideline to go through, and it's just going to explain a little bit, and then you can actually work with it and kind of go from there. So the first thing you want to know is if you want to start a formula in Excel, you start with the equal sign. I know in previous versions of Lotus and things like that, you would start with the plus sign, and a lot of people got in the habit of using the plus sign to start a formula, but that's not the proper way. You should start with the equal sign. To add certain formulas together, you would start with the equal sign and then select different formulas, or different cells. So for instance, if I am over here, I hit the equal sign, and I can just use the mouse to click on different cells. So I could say, for instance, this cell, and then I can say plus some other cell, and you can use ranges as well, but I'm going to just add a few cells together. So just by clicking that, it does show some formula, and there's the actual formula, and a very simple formula. I'm going to hit delete to clear that. There are a lot of functions. There's tons of functions in Excel. One of the most common is the sum function. So again, I'm going to demonstrate this. You hit the equal sign to create a formula. You type in sum. It'll try to autofill, and here's all the formulas that exist. So you can just type a parenthesis, and then it will try to give you helper text as to what it's looking for. So it'll try to describe what you can put in there. So again, these are references, numbers, whatever you want to put in. So we can click on a number with the mouse, and we could put a comma in between different things. And we can also use a range, so we can just highlight a range of data. And you'll notice it puts the formula range up here at the top. And then just by hitting enter, it'll sum all that information up. So I kind of went through both these two lines here on how to use the sum function. The next thing is just doing math. I mean, you can create whatever formulas you want with any kind of mathematics that you want. It does follow the order of operations, so it's going to do exponents and then multiplication and division and then subtraction and addition. But you can also override that with parentheses. So the parentheses are always done first. So again, we can start with a formula here, and we can just click and start building our formula with pluses or minuses or whatever we want to do. And then at some point we may want to use a parenthesis and say, you can nest these formulas together. So you could say sum of that, and then write parentheses and write parentheses again. And now we have a formula that's going to start with a parentheses and then do the other operations. Another formula is count and count A. The difference there is count is looking for numbers, and count A is looking for cells that are not empty. So for instance, if I do count of this range, it's going to give me 5 because it's counting numbers. What's interesting is if I can hit F2 or click up here and be able to edit it, and then I can just drag this range around. Notice now I'm selecting the value field as well, or the cell. It's still going to be 5 because value is not counted as a number. Now what's interesting is if I change that to count A, then it's looking for any cells that are not empty, as the help text up here says. And so when I do that, now it's 6. So that's what count and count A does. Average is just another function. If you want to create an average of something, you just highlight the range. It'll automatically do an average of it and come up with some number. And again, you can use commas and add multiple things together in different ranges by selecting them with a mouse or whatnot. So one of the things that I want to show you that's interesting is if you want to see what's going on with your formulas, you can hit F2, which will let you edit it, and it'll automatically this is not the formula. So if you hit the if we copy this formula, let me just copy this over here and get rid of the apostrophe here, which makes it text. So now it's a real formula. If I hit F2, it'll highlight all the different ranges that make up the formula. And again, these ranges are dynamic. You can click and drag and change the range, and it will change the actual code in the formula. But what's another interesting thing is if you go to formulas and then click on trace dependence. I'm sorry, that dependence shows what flows into it. If you click trace precedence, it shows you what ranges feed into that cell formula. So so for instance, this 664 here, if we click remove arrows and then we do the opposite, we click trace dependence, it'll show that this 664 is going into these other formulas. So by using trace dependence and trace precedence, you can see where your formulas are going. It's very, very helpful. Now the next thing I want to show you is how to go to a different sheet if you want to reference a different sheet. So it's very easy. Let's go to sheet 2, and just in some random area here we'll put a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say I want to reference that cell in another formula on sheet 1. So all I would do is hit equals to start the formula, and then click on sheet 2, and then click on the actual cell, and it'll build the actual formula for me with the proper sheet name and everything. And then I just hit enter, and it goes and grabs that information. So that's how you get a value from another cell. It could be another tab. It can even be another workbook altogether. So you could have it go out and find another workbook. Again, it's just a formula. You can build that by clicking, and you can be as elaborate as you want. Now the next thing you want to do is get in the habit of using named ranges. So when you're building formulas and building spreadsheets, oftentimes the information that you want to use on calculations is just something like E12 or something. So what you can do is you can build a name for something so that it's easier to reference and makes more sense. So let's say we have a number over here, and we'll just put some number in here, and we want to name that range. So what we can do is up at the top left where it says F14 here, we can change that to some info, and we can hit enter. So now what that does is anywhere I am on the spreadsheet or any other sheet altogether, I can click up here and I can see the named ranges. So here's some info, and it will take me there. So you can name a single cell or you can name a whole range. So let's say we want this whole thing to be named something. We could say it some named range whatever, and now again that's going to show up and it's going to highlight that whole range of information, and that's going to be helpful down the road when we reference it using like VLOOKUPs. Okay, so let's say we know this is called sum info. So if we want to reference that, we can just say equals sum, and it brings up a little history of all the names that are out there. So we can just click on it, double click, and it will now bring over that number. And if we change this number, of course, it's just a reference to that field. So that's how you use named ranges. They're very, very helpful, and sometimes what you can do is if your data is dynamic and changes, it can still have the same named range. You just redefine it as a named range. Now, one thing I want to mention is there's a way to manage all those named ranges. So what you do is you go to the Formulas tab and you go to Name Manager, and this shows you all the different ranges in there. So Maybe this named range down here I don't want, so I can delete that and click OK. Or maybe this sum info is pointing to the wrong cell. So the way you change that is just you highlight it, and then down at the bottom you change it to what you want it to be. So in this case we'll make it, let's say, F6, and then hit check, and then hit close. And now remember this formula here, if we type it in again, equals sum info, it's now going to reference this 545 up here, this cell F6. So and again, if I click on here and I click on sum info, it's now referencing cell F6. So so name ranges are huge. They're very important. They can be used in calculations just like anything else. It's just a pointer. So so that's what's important there. All right. So so the way this works is so this equals some name. So what this result field here is, the way this works is this is showing you what the actual formula is. So again, if I want to see what this is, I can click trace dependence. I can see that some name is actually this highlighted field. I can remove the arrows, and again, if I click up here in the top left, I can see what some name is. This formula here is again just doing the math. So if you want to play with this formula, you can see what would happen in the result. Okay, the next thing to look up is VLOOKUP, and that formula, what it does is it looks for a value in a range of data, looks at the far left column, and then if it finds it, it returns the column that you choose. So let's go over this. The first thing I want to show you is we actually are going to name this little cell here, this little cell block, data up at the top left. You see that. But we're going to just build some formulas to kind of go from there. So the way this works is just to show you, if I put in a number here like 50, it's going to give me a result. So we're going to work on this first row here. So if I give a number of 20, it's going to give me 125. And let me explain how that works. So what we're going to do is we're going to say equals VLOOKUP, and then a parenthesis, and it's going to want to build the formula or give us some tips. So the first thing it's looking for is a lookup value. So under the input column here, we're going to choose this cell C20. So we're looking up whatever's in C20, and then we're going to hit comma, and then it's going to ask for a table array. So that's going to be this whole table right here except for the bottom row. And then we're going to hit comma, and it's going to ask for a column index. What a column index means is once it finds it, which column do you want to return? So it starts with the left and then numbers it 1, 2, and 3, or as many columns as you want. So in this case, we're going to say 2. And then the next thing that it's asking for is, again, you can see up here, is it an approximate match or an exact match? So most likely you're going to want an exact match. There are times where you want it to find the nearest one, and that's something you can play with, but for now we're just going to do false, and we want an exact match. And then we're going to hit enter. And so what this does is it looks at 20, it tries to find it in this range right here, and then once it finds it, it returns the second column, which is 125. So if we put a 30 in here as the input, we should expect it to do a 664. So if we put 30, the result is 664. And if we do a 33, it's a 127, which is right here.